Hi, everyone. It's Stella Grizont from WUPA, where we help people work happier and live better. And today I have a very special guest with me, Sara Erbstein. Is it Erbstein or Erbstein? I should know this.
Erbstein.
Erbstein. Oh my God, I should know this because Sarah and I worked together for so long. She's one of my favorite. I mean, all my clients are my favorites, but I feel like if we lived in the same city, we would like hang out all the time, right?
You
Yeah.
would. I think so.
Yeah. So, so Sarah is a senior manager at Comcast, an executive recruiter, and she works on executive search. And I wanted to give you guys the inside scoop when it comes to interviewing because Sarah works with some of the most senior professionals at Comcast, which we all know is a huge organization. And so she sees it all when it comes to hiring leaders. And so I wanted Sarah to kind of share the secrets of what we don't know when we're kind of submitting the resume in what sometimes feels like a black hole, to be quite honest, and just to help you all through the process and really finding your dream job. So, Sarah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with before we even get to submitting the resume or the cover letter. What do you think is really important for people to do?
So I think when you're engaging in a job search, right, it can be daunting. It's certainly overwhelming. You need to make sure that you have your story, your career story, and your sort of what you're looking for. You need to make sure that that is all tied up in a nice little package, and that you've got your 5-minute elevator pitch ready to go. It's the more targeted you are in your search, I think the easier it will be to find that next great job. I always recommend, let me actually backtrack and tell you that resume writing, although I look at probably 100 resumes a day, is my least favorite activity. My resume is definitely out of date. If one of the most critical things you can do as a job searcher is to write your own resume. I know a lot of people like to farm that out to somebody, to professional resume writers, but really when you do that, recruiters can tell. And I look at a resume that was written by a professional versus, the individual who's got the experience on the page. You're missing that level of intimate detail about, and you're missing that personal connection that the person has with the roles that they've held. So I would encourage you guys to take the time to really craft your resume and make sure that it's speaking to your experience. And we can get into sort of the details of things to highlight.
Yeah. So tell us what's kind of in terms of best resumes you think essential, and then what are some common mistakes that you see people make?
Yeah, so you want the 2-page resume rule for executives, people who have 10, 15, 20 years of work experience. Throw that rule right out the window. If I get a resume that starts in 2000, when I know the person has been working since 1990, I want to know what those 10 years entailed. So I want the full picture. I want your education on there. I want the year you graduated on there. I want your first job, all the way up to where you are today. I also want to see a career summary or an objective statement at the top. That is sometimes, if I'm being quite honest, it's definitely the first thing I read, and sometimes it's the only thing I'll read. Depending on the job, depending on the role, depending on what the resume looks like. Really getting crisp in terms of what you've done, so things that you've accomplished and sort of the ROI of the actions that you've taken, any type of firm metrics you can put in place in terms of percentages of increase, whether you're talking about percentage of sales or cost savings or whatever that metric is. Cause and effect is incredibly important, right? The more detail that you can put in there, the better.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think that is so critical because it's so easy to get lost in writing your kind of duties and responsibilities, but not telling the story of the impact that you made. And that's what you're saying. It's like,
absolutely,
what was the impact that you made? And to actually give numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And often people think, well, it's not like I was in sales, so I don't have numbers to give, but there's still ways that you can quantify things, right?
100%. Like, I am not in sales. I'm an executive recruiter. Last year, I can tell you that I closed 42 searches on my own. I had 40% of my hires were female, 40% of my hires were diverse. Like, those are metrics. Those are critical to the nature of my job. So it's going to differ depending on your function and your role. But having that impact, to your point, is critical. I don't necessarily care what your duties and responsibilities were. I want to know the impact that you're having on the organization and what you've achieved in that role, right? What is your legacy when you're leaving that job? What are people saying about you? What are you leaving behind that is your legacy? And that is definitely a question that I ask everybody I interview, about each role that they've left. Maybe not each role, but sort of the ones that are most relevant. What was the impact you had? What would people say about you? And what's the legacy that you left? What are you most proud of?
Love that question. Getting chills. Yes, please continue. Okay, so what else is like really important for people to do when it comes to a resume? So you're saying the 1-page resume, or even 2-page if you're an executive, just give the whole story and take as much space as you need?
Yeah, I mean, again, you want to, I never like to put hard and fast rules around this, but you want to make sure that you've got clear information, right? Which I want to be able to look at the resume and see immediately what companies you've worked for, what the titles of the roles that you've held, how long you've held them. The dates are critical to me. And then 5 or 6 bullet points of the key things that the things that you've achieved, the impact that you've had on that organization. If you're a head of FP&A or a VP of, I know what that is. I know what the job is. I know what that role and responsibility is. But what I don't know and what I want to see in the resume is, again, the impact that you've had. So I think 5 or 6 bullet points per role, again, depending, is plenty. You want to make sure that the resume, to me, is a teaser, right? It's what piques my interest to pick up the phone and call you for further dialogue.
So you're really good at what you do, Sara, which I would say is not, unfortunately, the experience of many. There's lots of great recruiters. I mean, my sister was a recruiter too, but and you're amazing. But what about the recruiters who maybe don't have a grasp on the role that they're recruiting for? Do people need to, when it comes to giving technical descriptions of what you've done and accomplished, like, should there be a simplification, or kind of thinking about the audience that's reading it may not be, a subject matter expert? Because I've heard advice where you should try to make it like, not like jargony and just really
Right.
simple language.
100%, yes. So at Comcast, we speak in acronyms all the time. And when folks come in and I start to talk in acronyms, it's really, it's not welcoming, right? If I'm speaking in words that you don't understand, you're tuning out.
Yeah.
If I'm reading a resume.
Oh, Sara, I think the screen froze for some reason. And let's see. Can you hear me? We're at a very juicy point, and let's see. I'm going to press pause. Okay, small technical difficulty, but we're back. Okay, we were talking about jargon.
Right. So the less jargon, the better. You want to assume that your audience knows nothing, right? I can say this because I'm a recruiter. We're lazy. The more information you give us, again, the better. If you think about a company like Comcast, for any one of my roles, I have hundreds of applicants. That's hundreds of resumes that I need to sift through. So, the quicker I am up to speed in terms of what your resume says, the better off you as a candidate are. So get rid of the jargon. I know, especially for technical roles, engineers, networkers, that can be quite difficult. And that's probably a little bit, I would probably have a different answer for those types of folks, because that technical jargon is important. But for most roles, I would say get rid of the jargon, get rid of the acronyms, spell things out. Assume that you're having to educate the person reading your resume on the function and the role and the responsibilities.
So this may sound like a stupid question, but like, what about like font and like spacing and the actual design of a resume? Does that matter to you?
It does, yeah. And I hate to say that, but there's again, and I think this goes back to professional resume writers versus doing it yourself. There's lots of fancy formats out there that you can use and that sure look pretty. But again, if I can't quickly look at your resume and pick out key criteria that I'm looking for, such as, again, time and roles, companies, moves you've made, education, I'm moving right along to the next resume. It's got to be very clear. It's got to be concise. It's got to be easy to read. I love, bold and bullet points, a lot of words. I'm just going to glaze right over. You've got to make things pop and again, easy to pick out and read.
Love it. Yeah. One thing that I started doing, because even in I'm always even thinking about this in the emails that I write, and some advice that someone once gave me around bullet points was, because right now we're scanners. We don't actually read thoroughly, right? So the advice was, your first bullet point is the most important. Your second bullet point is second most important. And the last one is the third most important, because that's just kind of how our...
Interesting.
So
yeah, I've not heard that, but I 100% agree, because now when I'm thinking about it, when I read the first two and then I sort of skim down to the bottom.
Yeah.
So yes, for sure. But those first two bullet points should absolutely be sort of the big ticket selling items.
Totally. And then the other thing that I found really useful was to use capital letters sparingly, because if there's too many caps, it's very hard for your eye to distinguish.
Right. Yeah. Don't use fancy stuff. Write your resume using regular, sentence structure.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, bullet points, but starts of sentences are capitalized and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. Don't get fancy with fonts.
So, okay, talk about what else you see are common mistakes that people make when submitting their resume. I mean, do you read cover letters?
Nope.
No cover letters.
No. And that may just be me. That may not be an industry standard, but no, I can't actually tell you the last time I read a cover letter.
Yeah, I don't think you're
I will
alone.
Most people don't really submit cover letters anymore. I can't tell you in the last year that I've looked at a resume and then gone back to look at a cover letter.
Ah, great. That is so great thank you for sharing that, because I think a lot of people are tortured about their cover letters.
And one thing I'll say, if you submit a cover letter, that is, that's an example, that's a writing sample, if you will. So if you're going to submit a writing sample in the form of a cover letter, it better be perfect. There better not be any spelling mistakes, grammatical errors. So be mindful. If you are going to submit a cover letter, make sure that you have somebody else read it and edit it.
So how you get hundreds of resumes, and how does someone break through?
The honest answer to that question is through your network. So my job as an executive recruiter, right, I fill VP level roles at Comcast, again, hundreds of applicants, but my first stop when I kick off a search is my own personal network, who I've talked with in the past, past hires that I've placed, who do you know, who's good in this space. Really, people get jobs through people they know. So if you have, even if it's a third degree connection to the company that you're interested in, like for example, I actually just got an email yesterday via LinkedIn about somebody that I don't know him, but I recognize his name from high school. I immediately read it. He's interested in a job at Comcast. It's not a job that I'm filling, but it was the first thing I did that day was getting him in touch with the right recruiter. And it's just because I recognized his name. So use your network and use it in a smart way. You don't want to overextend the people that you're sort of networking with. But the first place I go is my network when I'm looking for candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I find is people are so, and this is something that, I coach people on, sorry, there's like a little fly. I coach people on, reaching out to their networks. And it's so interesting because this happens all the time. People are afraid to actually ask for help.
Yep.
And it's like, if your mom, best friends, former colleagues, like advocates for you do not know exactly what you're looking for or that you're even looking, that means you haven't asked around enough.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And the other thing is people like to help other people generally, right?
Yeah.
It makes them feel good. It's a selfish thing, right? Like when I got
Totally.
his email the other day, I'm like, oh, I can help him. This is easy. This will take me 3 minutes and it's my mitzvah for the day, my good deed for the day.
Yes.
So, people want to help other people. So you use it, tap into that network and keep that network strong too. You don't want to just call people when you need them, right? Because that feels a little slimy. You want to make sure that these are, people that you're in touch with when you don't need them.
Well, I was going to say one of the ways that you fortify that network is by doing good deeds. So, like, it actually, if I can help someone find a job or make a strategic connection, that actually kind of makes me look good. So,
Mhm.
if you're feeling like you're asking or putting upon people, you're actually giving them an opportunity to just kind of fortify their network because, hey, they're making a really solid connection. So,
Right.
I love that. Awesome. Well, any other tips that that you want people to know, or just kind of like, oh my God, I can't believe people are doing this, that you want people to avoid?
I think remember that we now are, we've got sophisticated tools and systems and tracking things. So if I'm a recruiter and I'm talking to you as a candidate on the phone, I'm taking notes, and those notes are being kept for future use, right? So you want to make sure that you are polite and respectful and courteous. That goes a very long way. I've got many instances of candidates who have come on site for interviews and are rude to the coordinator or the operations person that's taking them around the building. Or, when they're being scheduled with travel, they're rude to the travel agency. We ask about that, we find out about that, and that certainly plays into hiring decisions, right? How you treat the quote unquote little people matters. So don't forget that.
Oh, I love that. More chills. I think that's so good. It's, it's just to be nice.
Be nice.
Be
Be nice.
nice.
And we
Yeah.
all have a job to do, right? So be respectful of that.
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. This was so good.
Oh, my pleasure.
It's so good to see your face.
You too.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And you guys, if you have any more questions or comments, just send an email. And then if I can't answer them, maybe I'll ask Sarah to give me
Happy to.
a response. That would be great. Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks.